This week on Head to Head, should the saga have begun with Episode 2?
You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars. Begins now.
Hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vancil.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this podcast. So I was looking on YouTube the other day, and I actually saw this really, really interesting, I guess it's like an animated series or movie or something. It's called TIE Fighter. It's a short film. I think it might actually be a series.
Yeah, I checked it too. It was really cool. I love the animation of it. It has a lot of that Japanese anime vibe to it.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's name is Paul Johnson, Paul Otta King Johnson. If you look on Otta King, OTA King 77077, he has this YouTube page, and he has a couple things up that are cool, but I think he might have done this as a series, and his whole goal was he missed the whole 80s Japanese animation
look. And
yeah,
vibe,
that whole that anime look from the 80s and everything, that whole vibe, which of course is very near and dear to my heart because some of my favorite stuff like Fist of the North Star, Vampire Hunter D, those are the anime series that really was what brought me into anime in the first place, and they have that animation style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I really thought it was cool because it took actually the viewpoint of the Empire as far as the dogfighting battles and things of that nature, and it focused a lot on them and showing their skill set and the ship inside the cockpit of a TIE fighter. And
oh, yeah.
It was really cool and
very well done.
Yeah, very well done. I mean, and the music, the sound effects, everything is realistic. It sounds just like the movie.
Well, apparently it took him I think it said something like 4 years,
wow.
Just working weekends because it's all hand drawn.
Wow, that's talent. I mean, he's supremely talented.
I wouldn't even know how to begin to do that.
Well, first we have to learn how to draw.
Well, I mean, but even if I was some amazing artist or whatever, it's funny because this is like technology that's been around forever. I still don't. I know they draw cells. Mm-hmm. And I remember the whole where you flip through the thing really fast and it looks like...
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know.
Books, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, embarrassingly, I'm even in production and I have no idea how they make these cartoons. I can understand it from the computer standpoint.
Right.
So once it switched over to, computers, I was like, oh, okay, I get this.
Yeah.
But the whole 2D animation, old-style cartoon thing... still blows my mind.
Yeah, it's awesome. But yeah, if you get a chance to check it out, definitely watch it. It's really cool.
Well, you know what it's time to do.
Yeah, I am a little bit thirsty, so we definitely got to go get myself.
You get thirsty a lot.
Well, I talk a lot.
Hey, it's always a good reason to go to the Cantina.
Yes,
So what do we got? What do we got first in our Cantina discussion today?
Well, let's talk about bounty hunters.
The bounty hunters.
I mean, that's something that hasn't been explored as much in Star Wars, at least not in the movies.
Well, you know what's kind of funny about that, though, is the fact that as little as they actually are featured in the movies, they're peppered throughout the movies, but
yeah,
they're really prominent. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think about it, the bounty hunters, everybody's aware of them. They play a really prominent role in pretty much the overtone of the films because, Han Solo is always running away from
somebody
because of the price that Jabba put on his head. So they factor in there pretty heavily.
Yeah, even in the animated series, we've talked about, even the other episode, we've talked about bounty hunters being prevalent and popping up and showing up. And I mean, and there's funny because there's different types of bounty hunters. And then there's even, I don't want to say Jedi bounty hunters, but almost like Sith bounty hunters, almost like with the Inquisitors, they will be considered bounty hunters. And
that's a good point
from a certain point of view. If you want to look at that from that perspective,
you could actually say that. And then of course there's some where they've taken on Jedi. I mean, even Jango Fett, was taking on Jedi. It seemed all the time. Of course, he met his untimely demise from a Jedi, but
Team Windu,
but he basically, it actually reminds me, in thinking about it, is we actually took that Jedi quiz not too long ago.
Oh, yeah, we did.
And both of us ended up as Mace Windu.
Absolutely.
So we both would have taken out Jango Fett. So who's your favorite bounty hunter?
It's a tie for me. Of course, I absolutely love Cad Bane. He's the coolest to me. I mean, he kind of reminds me of a Thrawn as a bounty hunter.
Yeah, I
like
can
if
see
you
that.
really like look
can
at
see
like
that.
even the way he's drawn, his mannerism, his demeanor, his tone of voice, it's very calm. But my other would probably be Asajj Ventress. I would consider her, once again, she's another bounty hunter.
I mean, she could be, and you have a point. Is a lot of people I think would, they're considered more like she would be considered more of like a Sith apprentice in a way. But yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, she is a bounty hunter.
Yeah, a lot of people, but Aurora Singh is right up there too.
Yeah,
because she trained, Boba Fett.
It's true.
So, yeah. What about you?
It's interesting because Boba Fett actually made his first appearance in the Star Wars Holiday Special. One of these days,
love the holiday special, man.
Well, I love the concept. I mean, it's so cheesy. Well, I'll tell you what. Well, maybe that'll be like one of our next round of episodes.
We got to do it like around Christmas or something.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah, there you go. That could be our featured discussion.
Yeah, let's get some eggnog and watch the holidays.
You'll need it. My favorite bounty hunter, I mean, of course, Boba Fett has always been up there.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, the way that he's portrayed in the movies, well, maybe not so much Empire. Empire, he was cool. Like, he was really cool in Empire. Return of the Jedi, he was cool up until his death, or his presumed death. I actually don't think he's dead. I mean, in the Legends series, he made it out of the Sarlacc pit, but obviously that isn't canon yet.
Right.
So we have to wait and see if Disney is actually going to consider that canon or not. But if they do, and I sincerely hope they do, then I don't think we've seen the end of Boba Fett's adventures. But actually, one of my favorite bounty hunters of all time is IG-88.
Ah.
But unfortunately, it's all because of what is now a non-canon novel.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to think of which one. I believe it was the Tales of Mos Eisley collection of stories where there was one on IG-88. I believe there was also another book that featured him too. It's been so long since I read a lot of those novels. Because, Legends has been Legends for pretty few years now.
Yeah, well, that's why it's Legend.
Yeah. So the old expanded universe, there were a lot of great stories from the expanded universe, though, too. That's another, at some point, we got to talk about a lot of stuff from, the EU, because there's so many things, and of course, they keep taking things from it. And the bounty hunters are definitely things that they keep borrowing from. Bosk
I was about to say,
another great one.
Yeah, Bosk, he really showed up in that one episode where they dropped all the characters in that one little jungle, and it was like in the game, and they actually had to like survive and try to outwit all the bounty hunters, but he has those lizard abilities, so he can smell and he can hear things. And Bosk is no joke, man.
He's another one of those guys. For a long time, he was actually one of the guys that was second only to Boba Fett as far as people knew who he was.
Yeah, skill set, yeah.
IG-88, everybody sort of knew who he was because of the way he looked, and the action figure was so cool.
Yeah.
I had that. But he was more in the background. And then there was Dengar. He was the one that was the bandage-wrapped guy.
Yep.
Who actually, when I was a kid, I used to think that was Zuckuss, but that turned out to be like a completely different guy.
Embo was cool too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's definitely crafty and wily, man. Like, I mean, he's got all types of tricks up his sleeve, and that's the cool thing about the bounty hunters is that they have to contend with all these different types of characters, especially when they have Jedi who have all these abilities, who can sense things, have lightsabers, can use the Force and to their advantage, and they still have, it's kind of like Batman, like being around a bunch of superheroes, and he still has to be able to contend with the best of them, and that's what makes bounty hunters really cool. And I would love to see a bounty hunter centric movie.
I was just going to ask you that too. Well, if you could see, so when you say that, do you mean you want to see a movie that's like an ensemble cast with all the bounty hunters? Do you want to see a movie that features a particular bounty hunter?
I think...
What you got for me?
Well, I think what would be cool is to start off with an ensemble. Almost make it like one of those, those movies that have, where they have to escape an island? Mm-hmm. Almost like, so let's just say some dictator in the empire is looking for like the best bounty hunter, and you have some of the best show up, and they're looking for like maybe, okay, I'm looking for a couple of bounty hunters to have on our staff so we can deploy whenever we need. And then, like I said, the top bounty hunters that we all know and love actually survive, but there's some other cool ones out there that may participate in this particular game. Almost like a little Hunger Games thing, but just with bounty hunters. Like, that would be cool.
That would actually be cool. I could think of a couple of different things that would be cool along those lines. Like the Hunger Games style thing you're talking about would be cool. Like an Ocean's 11 type of thing.
Okay.
Almost like a bounty hunter, not necessarily like a heist film, but in a way it would mirror Solo, where it's like all these bounty hunters are hired. They got to go and find, they got to go on some mission or something.
Yeah.
And then are they betraying each other? Who's going to do what to who? And
in that world, you could honestly, and this is something that people have been talking about for a while, is doing a movie about the underworld of Coruscant.
Yeah, that would
if
be cool.
that would be a perfect time to use the bounty hunters, because then you have so many criminals, so many different things, and you can show them on different missions and kind of showing their skill sets and what they can do, and you can learn about them.
Another thing they could do, going along those lines, is they could do something what they were probably going to do for a Solo 2 and feature Jabba's palace, like the whole Mos Eisley, Tatooine thing, and actually have Jabba the Hutt and show the Hutt, the gangsters and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just do something like that. Or
almost make like a Star Wars mob movie.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Another thing they could do, or they can make it along the lines of Mission Impossible.
Okay.
But another thing they could do, if they wanted to do a different spin, now, of course, this would take longer, but they can mirror the Marvel Universe. They can make the standalone movies, and then they come together like the Avengers.
That would be interesting.
To where you get... And the thing is, and I don't necessarily know if I would want an origin story. Nah,
I think... And that's one thing you don't want to do. I mean, we already kind of know Boba Fett's origin story. We got that in the prequels.
That's true.
So we really don't need that. But and if you were going to do an origin story, that would be the only one people really probably legitimately care about is Boba Fett, because he's the most recognizable and the most famous. But I think with all the other ones, just kind of show who they are. Almost kind of like a Suicide Squad type thing.
That would be good, or something, because one of the things I don't understand, and Hollywood in general just falls into this trap. Anytime they feature a character in a movie, somebody that's somewhat known, they automatically do the origin story.
Yeah.
Like, why especially with somebody like Batman, Spider-Man.
Yes.
It's like, really, do we need the
Superman?
Same? Yeah, Superman. It's like, who doesn't know the origin of these heroes already? And it's like,
if you don't know, you can find it very easily.
Yeah, and that's my whole thing. It's like, that's why I liked movies where they don't necessarily tell the origin. They just go, okay, here's the character, and they're in a story.
Or I think it was the Hulk.
Yeah.
Well, they kind of did it in the opening credits.
Yeah, they did it
like
exactly. They did it in the opening credits.
So by the time the movie starts, you just can get on with it.
You could just get on with it. You got all the information, and they could totally do that for characters in the Star Wars universe, particularly the bounty hunters. And you have a point, because one of the things that I've always said when I've discussed this with other people, and they say, well, we need a Bosk, say, origin story, because nobody knows where this guy came from. And my thing is, like, look, you saw him for probably like 45 seconds or something in The Empire Strikes Back. Right. And everybody, all these people know who he is.
All right, because they have books, they follow it. I mean, just...
Yeah, and I don't.
And that was back then when you didn't have the internet really like that. So
exactly. Now you could just go on StarWars.com, look in the data bank or whatever,
Wikipedia or something.
Exactly.
Go for it.
Or just go on YouTube where there's 1,000 shows on Star Wars, and eventually we'll have one on there too, probably. But
yeah, perhaps we should just do an origin story so that way we don't have to do it.
Exactly. Well, speaking of people that might need origin stories, our next one is Lobot. And the question that we're asking in the Cantina today is Lobot an underrated character? Now, this is something that we want you guys, we want your input on everything that we talk about on the show, but I'm especially curious out there about what you guys think of Lobot. Because I happen to think that he's an underrated character. He's actually more important in the Star Wars universe than I think what a lot of people, for the credit that he deserves, I just don't think that people really are giving it to him in the way that they should, because he's basically like Lando's right-hand man.
Mm-hmm.
He's tied in, at least when we meet him in Empire Strikes Back, he's directly tied into the computer through that crazy apparatus. Yeah, that apparatus he has on his head.
It's like a backwards Geordie LaForge.
Pretty much. I mean, that's kind of what it's like. And he's a really fascinating character. And he basically has this whole history where he was in this battle, and because that headband, well, what we call a headband, it's actually a cybernetic implant. Right. It basically, one of the downsides to it is that it actually erases your entire personality.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah. Now, Lobot actually was able to fight that. So he was able to maintain his personality. Then there was some battle.
So he's always been the quiet guy in the back of the room.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, StarWars.com actually has a Lobot soundboard, and it's just blank.
That's ingenious.
I mean, that's just awesome. I mean, that sounds like something we would do.
Exactly.
But he's just this really great character, and that I don't think has been fully explored. I know they've written about him to some degree in the Legends novels. I don't recall him actually popping up yet in the new canon novels. Now, here's the question. You probably remember this. I can't believe I forgot this. Who's Lando's droid in Solo?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I completely forgot that one.
I know, isn't that weird?
Yeah.
I should look that up. But while I'm looking that up, so Lobot sort of fulfills the same role that she does.
Yeah. Almost like a valet, or almost like K2S1 was with, K2SO was with
L3.
L3, yep.
Yeah, L3.
Yeah, that's kind of like how, I mean, and that's the funny thing, because droids are often like sidekicks and things of that nature. And at first, honestly, when I was a kid, I thought Lobot was like Data from Star Trek. I thought he was like an android or something, because he had the whole thing. And because
he kind of acted that way.
Lando had like the first I watched, man. He had like the little thing he could, type on it and talk to Lobot, and his head would start lighting up and stuff. And,
yeah, and he would have those like jerky movements.
Yeah, so
like
I thought he was an android or something. I was like, oh, okay, well, he's just like a humanoid robot, whatever. But yeah, I didn't know he's like an actual human being. But he never said anything, so I really thought he was an android. But yeah, I think Lobot, I mean, I don't know. I mean, he's cool. I mean, if they had a little bit more information, or they, show more interaction with Lando, that would be cool. I mean, I'm not particularly that interested in Lobot. I think he was cool, and he kind of had that, he
I don't know,
served his purpose,
for some reason, I've always been just completely fascinated by him.
Because it looks like Jean-Luc Picard. It's probably,
well, yeah, almost
like Professor Xavier.
Locutus.
Yeah,
of Borg. I mean, he's sort of like the original version of that. Yeah, but I don't know. There's a couple of reasons. The way that he looked, and again, this shows the power of marketing, because...
And costumes.
Well, yes. And hey, that's another thing. They did not have Lobot's cybernetic implant.
You're right.
But, and this just goes to show you, he's underrated.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing. The power of marketing, when I was just like 10 years old or whatever, I bought the Lobot action figure because it was a Star Wars action figure, but it looked cool. Mm-hmm. And I remembered him from the movie, and the character just fascinated me because I could see that he was obviously very important.
Right.
He was almost like the head of the security force in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
He helped out Lando in a very critical situation.
Right.
And you come to find out in the novels, and this is probably why he doesn't fascinate you as much, because I know in a lot of the EU novels, you just didn't get to a lot of them.
Right.
You read a few of them, but you didn't get to as many.
Yeah, right.
And the ones that I read had a lot of really cool pieces of information and just adventures and stuff, and it just showed Lobot's importance. And I think even in the comics, I don't think he had his own, although he might have. I don't know. But I do know he was featured prominently in a few comics. And so he's sort of the new, he fulfills that same role that L3 filled in Solo. It's sort of like Lando's sidekick, right-hand man.
Valet.
Yeah, valet, concierge or whatever.
Well, you gotta wonder, does he have to like charge that thing at night? Like, can he take it off? Well, it's an implant, so I guess he can't take it off. But is this like some like charging port that he has to plug that thing in? Or
I mean, it's
firmware update.
Like hey, look, you had to plug in R2, right?
Hey, I'm just speculating here. Just speculating.
Well, here's it. What do you guys think? Is Lobot an underrated character, or does anybody even care? Am I like the only one here that really is fighting for recognition of Lobot?
And did Steve Jobs give the idea of Lobot to George Lucas?
There you go. All right, what's our next topic?
Well, the next thing is I've been checking out some of the Last Jedi bonus footage, and it's really, really cool.
We're just asking for fan backlash. You realize that we've talked about The Last Jedi in like 3 or 4 different podcasts, and so far people have been letting it go, but...
Hey, look, listen. This episode, hey, we haven't got 9 yet, so this is what we have to talk about, so deal with it, people. But I think it's really cool. I love listening to the vision of a director. I think that's really cool to me because you kind of really get the insight on where they're trying to go, and you kind of see their passion and how they're trying to bring this story to life. And for some people, I think that if people actually watched that, they would actually learn to appreciate The Last Jedi.
I can tell you that a lot of times listening to a director's commentary or watching an interview will actually change my opinion of a movie. In fact, there's been a lot of times, I call it the behind the music syndrome. You remember the whole VH1 behind the music series?
Oh, yeah.
Well, a lot of times, invariably, what would happen is a band would come on. Now, they would either have a behind the music on a particular band that I loved, or sometimes maybe I didn't really...
give a crap about.
Yeah, I just didn't really care, right? By the end of that episode...
Kelly and the Broomsticks.
By the end of that episode, I am like online downloading all their albums because now I'm suddenly into them, because when I hear their story, when I hear their perspective, when I hear the stories behind their music, now I'm drawn into it. Now I'm intrigued. Now I want to hear it. And a lot of times, even if it's a band that I love, and then I hear some of these stories I've never heard or information I never heard before, I suddenly have a new appreciation for the music. And that's kind of the way the movies are too, is that when you hear what the director was trying to do, when you hear the story they're trying to tell, and sometimes even it might not have anything to do with that. It might be just all the hardships that they had, or just what it took to really get this movie out. You develop a new appreciation for it. And I think that's probably what the Last Jedi bonus features do. I've seen a few of them. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, the whole the director and the Jedi, that was awesome. Just watching his interaction with Mark Hamill, and do you even see it where Mark Hamill initially said, "Yo, I don't really agree with this is the way my character should go," and even Mark Hamill had to admit that Luke Skywalker is not his. It doesn't belong to him. He just gets to rent it out every now and again and play that character, but that character just doesn't belong to him. So the universe or the heads of Star Wars can take that character wherever they want to. And I think Rian Johnson did a great job because it's something that people didn't expect. And that's one of the things that I really loved hearing from Rian Johnson, and then watching him work with other actors and seeing his involvement as far as set design, as far as his experiences, saying like, "Hey, I had my morning coffee on the Millennium Falcon." Like, how many people can say they've done that?
Yeah, I mean, and that goes to a point that I felt when I'm watching these features. You know, you and I are sitting there watching them, and I'm thinking, these poor people, they had so much fun.
So much fun.
So much fun making this movie, not even realizing what they were about to face.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of its own tragedy.
It is. It's really its own tragedy. And the thing is that you really see, when you see everything that they went through on the production, and, you know, just the problems they had to solve, and just how they pulled off some of these things, you really develop a new appreciation for it and what goes into making these films. It's not an easy job.
No, not at all. And like I said, I still love The Last Jedi. I think it was a big risk. I think, of course, it had its issues. So I'm not saying it's a perfect movie, but I think that...
Well, it's definitely a better movie than what people are...
Yeah, definitely. And I think if people just get past their own expectations and just see it for what it really is, and I think you can get that from the bonus footage. So that's
I think that we're definitely, we're total flag wavers, banner carriers for whatever for The Last Jedi, because, I'll say it, like you said, wasn't a perfect movie, but it was way better. So if you didn't really care for the movie that much, I would suggest check them out. Check out the Last Jedi features. I'm not saying it's going to totally change everybody's mind. Like, you're going to watch the features and go, oh, wow, I love this movie now.
Yeah.
But at least understand, here's the thing. Before going online and attacking Rian Johnson or any of these other people that have been in the movie, or, chase somebody else off of social media.
Or us.
or us. That's a good point. Watch these features and see what actually went into making this movie and what they were doing, and maybe you'll gain more of an understanding and a little bit more empathy. And if nothing else, if you love the movie like we did, you'll actually get some new insight, and it's a new way to enjoy it. Yeah,
definitely heighten your experience.
All right, so what do we got next?
Well, I think we'll pay my tab and we can head out of the cantina.
So it's time to leave the cantina.
So I think we're going to go to Duel of the Fates. All right, in today's Duel of the Fates, we're going to ask the question, which would you rather own, the Millennium Falcon or the Ghost from the TV show Rebels?
Ooh. This particular topic or question is not quite as cut and dry as what you would think. Now, of course, immediately I want to say the Millennium Falcon.
Right.
Immediately.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty much the flagship of Star Wars. It's so much so Star Wars' main identifying ship that it's almost its own character in its own right.
Indeed.
The Ghost has actually gotten to be almost like that too, from a certain point of view. Had to say that. Yeah,
see what I did there.
And I guess a lot of it has to do with what type of a person in the Star Wars universe would you be? Because you can almost see like that would influence which ship you would want to own.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, I would definitely go with the Millennium Falcon, simply because of its armament. I think with the Millennium Falcon, you're a lot safer. You can do more. It's just as fast or faster than the Ghost. Sure.
I don't remember. I think they actually did a comparison.
Did they?
I think so.
We gotta look that up one day.
I'm gonna look it up right now.
We'll go ahead. Well, I'll continue with my explanation. So, so the Millennium Falcon, I think, is really, like you said, it's the flagship. It's like the Starship Enterprise of Star Wars. And I think that it has so many different things. It can do so many things. And it allows people to, like you said, it is his own character, and it allows our heroes to get out of some harrowing situations. And the biggest thing for me is that it's larger, so it can withstand more blows. So when you're up against Star Destroyers or, a bunch of TIE fighters and it has shields, you can actually
here's the
yourself.
Interesting thing. The actual answer is the opposite. The Falcon, being a smuggling ship, really wasn't built to take... Now, it's true. Solo made a lot of modifications.
Indeed, he did.
But the Ghost is definitely a burlier ship because it's more of a military vessel. But
I don't see that, but okay.
I know. Well, that's the thing. Once again, it comes down to...
I didn't write it, so...
Well, it's not even that. It comes down to what it's actually used for, because you got to remember the modifications that Han Solo made.
Right.
So even though it's like a YT-class freighter, it's not even the way Lando had it. Look at how many changes it went from when Lando had it to when Han Solo had it.
True.
And Solo made all these crazy modifications. So you're probably right. And I mean, let's face it, it's been fending off Star Destroyer fire.
Yeah.
You know, these crazy battles and everything.
He's taking some hits and it still survives, you know, and it has deflector shield. I mean, I'm not saying the Ghost doesn't, but I'm saying...
the Ghost actually probably has more by way of military. So that's what I'm saying. If you're expecting more skirmishes, but let's face it, if Han Solo flew the Ghost,
yeah,
you know, a lot of it comes down to a pilot. I mean, when it comes down to which you would rather own, though,
I think I still would rather own the Falcon. One, it has more space. It has a cape room, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah, of course. That's what it really comes down to. You just want the cape room.
I want the cape room. You know, I think it has those guns. It has a nice little sabacc table, probably somewhere in the back. It's definitely got that other game that they were playing with the holographic.
Well, I will say this, especially when Lando had it. So in the Solo movie, it was definitely sleeker and nicer. I mean, because if you look at the Ghost is more of a military ship. It's really more for like transport. It's not really a living quarters.
Well, the Millennium Falcon actually started off as almost like a luxury type.
Yeah.
Because of look at Lando. He likes nice stuff, so of course he's going to make everything look all sleek and cool. And
absolutely,
he had a whole bar in there. I mean, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
got my own cantina.
Yeah,
you know?
no. See, the question almost should have been: do you want Lando's Millennium Falcon or Solo's Millennium Falcon?
I started to ask that question because you do, and because you have to make that distinction. But yeah, I still would just take the Falcon anyway, just because I feel like it has magic in it. It probably can get me out of a lot of harrowing situations.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, if you look at everything the Falcon was able to do, and you look at the situations it was in, it's definitely a versatile ship.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the Falcon, plus, I mean, honestly, I hate to say it, but, and it's probably the same with you, we're probably biased.
Mm-hmm.
We've lived with the Falcon longer.
Yeah, true.
You know, the Ghost has only been around for 4 years because that's when Rebels came out.
Right.
Whereas the Falcon we've lived with for, before you were born. Not before I was born, unfortunately, but,
yeah,
you know, I mean, I was 7 years old when I was introduced to the Falcon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was not 7 years old when I was introduced to the Ghost. So I think that actually plays a lot maybe in the decision.
Well, cool. Well, at least
right.
we can agree on that.
Yeah, we can agree on that. You know what? We've been really nice in our last
we've been getting along, man.
Yeah, this is not really Duel the Fates. We're going to have to try to figure something, you know, think of a question that we're going to totally disagree on.
Yeah.
This love fest is getting annoying.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't do romances.
Yeah. Well, what do we got next?
Well, we have our feature story, which we like to call From a Certain Point of View.
From a certain point of view.
So today's topic is, should the trilogy or the Star Wars saga started with Episode 2?
Yeah, should it begun with Episode 2? I've long said that it should have. Now, there's going to be a lot of people, and I've actually read this. There's a way... Well, there's that whole machete order thing,
right?
You know, of viewing it and everything. And if I remember correctly, they did not have Episode 1 in that.
No, they didn't.
And that's actually where I got the idea from. I mean, I remember we've been talking about this since like Revenge of the Sith came out, where we were going, you know, it's too bad they didn't actually start with Episode 2, make Revenge of the Sith Episode 2. So Attack of the Clones would have been 1, Sith would have been 2, then have another one.
Maybe even Rogue One.
Maybe even Rogue One, or maybe something kind of like the novel Lords of the Sith, right?
Yeah.
Where you show what happened immediately after. Maybe chronicle Vader hunting down Jedi or the rise of the Empire, all that. And then do your original trilogy. Because there's not a whole lot, in my opinion, that you really need from Episode 1 that really affects the entire story. No,
and I agree with that. I think that you could make the argument that, all right, well, you don't see how Obi-Wan came to become Anakin's master, per se, because you really don't see that until the...
No, you could do that in the opening crawl.
Well, yeah, and like I said, I mean, you could still kind of cover that in 2 if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I think you could start with 2. And in a lot of people's mind, you probably would prefer to start with 2 because a lot of people didn't like episode 1 outside of Darth Maul. And you probably would never have Jar Jar. So,
well, there's that. I mean, I just think that when you really look at what the whole prequel trilogy is supposed to be about, because let's face it, the whole saga is about the Skywalkers.
Right.
And, what happened with them, how they came to prominence and everything. And it's about a fall and redemption.
Yeah.
And essentially, I don't need to see a 10-year-old Anakin Skywalker. There are some cool things that I thought were neat about 1 where they showed a little bit that he kind of had a temper and a lack of patience. And it was interesting to see that he had some Darth Vaderisms even as a kid in a way. But
right.
I mean, you really didn't need it.
Yeah, I think with 1, you really didn't need to see him that young. I think you could have started with episode 2 and still show, because you still had Shmi Skywalker passing away from the Sand People, so you can still kind of
you could have had that.
You could have had that scene and still been. You could have expounded upon it and explained like, okay, well, yeah, I want to go back home and free my mother because we were slaves, and then this kind of happened, and now, yeah, I slaughtered them like animals, and he still goes off to Palpatine. And I mean, the only thing y'all could really say is that you really don't get to see that Anakin had these abilities at such a young age. That's the only thing you're probably missing, is that with the pod races. Because for him being that young and competing with...
But they could have talked about the pod races, and that could have been all expositional, because if you think about a lot of things that happen in A New Hope, you got an idea just from what Obi-Wan told us.
Yeah, I mean,
when he was talking to Luke and he was telling him a little of the history, you got a sense of what happened in the prequels without even seeing them.
True. I mean, and that's what I say. You didn't. That's what I mean. Like in 1, you didn't have to see that. I mean, that's the only thing I probably would say that benefits the story is that.
Well, okay,
aspect.
Yeah, if you're going for that, sure. And of course, Palpatine's.
I was just about to say that, like, and showing how Palpatine, that was kind of at the beginning of his ascension and basically into politics and into ultimately becoming the emperor. So, but once again, you can still kind of show that in 2.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, too. Both of us actually read the novelization of Attack of the Clones. There was a lot of things in the novel that I think that they should have included in the movie.
Oh, absolutely.
And had they not had episode 1, that would have been a logical thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, like I said, I think episode 2 could stand out on its own. You make some modifications.
Well, that was what I was going to ask. So let's just say that episode 2 is 1. So Attack of the Clones is episode 1 now. Mm-hmm. What would you have done differently, or what would you have added or maybe taken away besides Jar Jar?
Well, he wouldn't. If I started with 2, he wouldn't be there in the first place. Well, I think I would have delayed the whole Padme relationship a bit, at least towards the end. I probably would have made that a little bit more towards the end, and then focus more on Anakin's upbringing, or as far as his conflict with him missing his mother being a slave, and him wanting to go back and free her. I would have made that kind of more of a focal point, like it was into, because that's kind of where he was trying to go with it. But I would have kind of downplayed the whole Padme thing, at least maybe to midway in the movie, instead of him like in the first, when he first is on the elevator with Obi-Wan, and he's like, oh, I haven't seen her in years, and he's just so happy and giddy.
Not only
like
that, but here's the problems that I had now that you're bringing this up, is that they focus too much, I think, on that.
Yeah.
You had the whole scene where they're in the field and they're frolicking or whatever, and it's like, okay, what I want to see is more Obi-Wan, Anakin adventures. More of them, more of their friendship, more of them fighting in the Clone Wars. Well, the Clone Wars hadn't actually technically begun yet, but just they were still doing stuff, and you got a little bit of that. But I would have flipped the script. I would have had less Padme Anakin romance, more Obi-Wan Anakin adventures.
Well, I think the romance part is important simply because it definitely shows that Anakin was a rule breaker. because at that time, or at any time, Jedi aren't really, according to their rules, you're not supposed to form attachments. And so by him sneaking off with, Padme, not only just because she's a woman and, but she's also a senator. And then that's...
Well, you're not supposed to go and slaughter sand people either. And, but he did. And I think that you're right. I mean, they could... I'm not saying that to cut that stuff out of the movie. I'm saying that what they needed to do was focus less on it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. That's what I meant like at the beginning, because he was just so focused on seeing Padme, and I haven't seen her in years. And
I know, and it's like, he wanted like 10. I mean, how serious could it have been?
Yeah, she's probably like 14 or something, 15 years old. So it was like... You really didn't have a shot, man. But,
yeah.
I mean...
That's why she looked... And that's one thing that I thought that they did that was brilliant in 2, was she kept seeing him as little Annie.
Yeah.
And it took a while before...
she kind of realized, he's growing up a bit.
Yeah, okay.
But, and that's what I said, I think that if you would have changed that dynamic and more so emphasized Anakin's conflict with going after his mother, and then I think if he would have... Because he lost his mother in that situation, that would have drawn him to Padme.
Absolutely.
And because he's looking for that...
Let's face it, that black leatherish looking ensemble that she was wearing, I think, was drawing him to her.
Oh, yeah, when they had that little kind of like...
Yeah, that little fireside chat, so to speak.
Something more comfortable, if you were.
I'm like, really, George? What was that all about? That came out of nowhere. She's like, Well, and then that tight little... I'm taking this show into a different realm, but I'm pointing
the views and comments expressed are not that of.
I'm pointing this out, right? Yeah, exactly. Not the typical guy thing, but because it was such a weird shift.
Talking about the all-white number?
Yeah. I mean, it looked great on her. But
True.
The thing that I thought was a little strange was the fact that wasn't what she was dressing like in the beginning. It was almost like, I don't know if that was supposed to be an influence or what, but...
Well, she's still a young woman, and I think but at the same time, she's a senator, so she has to dress a certain way in the public eye. But then, so I think there's...
Well, I mean, the white ensemble, I think, too, was more because she had to do more action-oriented stuff.
Yeah, so it's more form-fitting. You don't have stuff to grab onto. She can't get snatched. I mean, in some ways, there's a tactical reason for that. But I think with Anakin...
Did you see that they had that at the Power of Costume thing that we saw last week?
With the
white outfit at the end?
Yeah.
Those pictures are up on our site, by the way.
Absolutely. So definitely check those out. But I think, like I said, I think if you were to focus more on Anakin's conflict, and then you show the dissension after that, because he's conflicted, which it was in the movie, and he went to Padme like, yo, I'm more powerful. Obi-Wan's holding me back. I should be able to do this. Yeah, now
that whole scene made perfect sense.
That was the good turning point. And then him running to Padme for that comfort. She's trying to teach him how to handle his ability. And then, of course, he forms that bond with her that
and
he shouldn't.
It is showing, and it is also showing the calming influence. Like,
right.
You get the sense that, and it perfectly sets up in Revenge of the Sith, because you see that she really is the last influence of the good in him, and when she's dead, it's sort of like that influence is gone, even though, of course, he's in the suit, and he's all like, where's Padme at the end? But it just shows that he cares. And in fact, I'm trying to remember now, once again, this always happens to us. We always bring stuff up and then we don't remember this stuff. But it might have been either in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, or no, it might have been in Lords of the Sith, but it was one of the books where he started reflecting on Padme.
Mm-hmm.
And it started making him, almost think about things. And then because the idea of what Palpatine did with the suit, I don't know, this is somewhat common knowledge if you're sort of a fan nerd like us, but Palpatine actually designed the suit to constantly inflict pain on him to keep him angry.
Yeah, I think that was in The Rise of Vader, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, but I mean, The Rise of Vader ended up not being canon anymore, but it might have been in Lords of the Sith.
Okay.
But... And then, of course, there's that great Vader comic series that's out. And I think it was actually mentioned somewhere in there, too. But I mean, it would just be great if they could have just, again, not eliminated the Padme Anakin thing.
Just reduced it.
Just reduced it so it wasn't so prominent in the movie, because I think, honestly, you really needed to set up the Obi-Wan Anakin friendship even more.
Yeah.
So you felt that loss.
So you felt the fall and 3 more. Yeah.
And the betrayal, and it just, I mean, even though you felt it, it would have been even more effective, I think, if they had focused more and you had gotten this really deep friendship and this connection.
Yeah.
And then when it all fell apart, I think it would have really driven that point home.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's time to go to our next segment, which is where we talk to you about your question and answers. That's called Clear Your Mind. So this week, we have a couple of anonymous. People don't like to give their names all the time, but what do we got for first, Daryl?
Well, the first one we have is, why didn't Darth Vader or the Emperor ever discover Yoda's location?
Well, fortunately, this is a very easy one to answer. So a lot of people have wondered this. What's ironic is I actually found out because of George Lucas's commentary on Return of the Jedi, I think. Because obviously you think these two titans of the dark side should have been able to find him. They knew that Obi-Wan was around. You know, they were sensing Luke, so yeah, why didn't they sense Yoda? But the answer is, that's why Yoda went to Dagobah.
Yep. Because
Dagobah actually had so much life, and it also had a dark side area in there that Yoda somewhat camped around.
Yep.
So his force, I guess, or his
first force identity was masked.
Yeah, it was masked basically in all this life form, and then plus you had the dark side. So if the force was sensed, it could have been mistaken. But there's another explanation too, is that as a prequel trilogy was going, the dark side was really powerful, and so Palpatine was on top of his game. But by the time of the original trilogy, when the script was starting to get flipped, he was actually weak. That's why, if you remember, when, Vader came and said, he felt Luke's presence, he's on Endor, and, Palpatine was like, well, I didn't sense that.
Right.
He's like, are you sure? And Vader's like, yeah, basically, So, and that's just demonstrating that Palpatine was actually losing a little bit of his
foresight. Basically.
Yeah, his foresight. Like, he couldn't really sense a lot of things. The dark side was actually weakening, but of course, he was too arrogant to even consider that possibility.
Well, the other theory that a few of my friends have had, and I've heard from other people too, is that they felt that Yoda found a way to kind of boost the light side because of Dagobah, because of all the life on Dagobah. Side, yeah. He was able to generate more power from that and project that, and to the point where, like you said, Palpatine became really arrogant in his own power, and he wasn't. And then they probably figured that by now Yoda was dead. I mean,
that's
because
true.
He was
like
already
900.
Yeah, so and that's also brought up kind of a thing with us where, in Return of the Jedi, did Yoda die because he was expending so much energy trying to combat the dark side from Dagobah that it kind of aged him a bit?
Well, that's possible. I mean, let's not forget, too, that, after Palpatine fought him in Revenge of the Sith, he probably thought that he'd beat him to the point where he was dead. I don't even think that he thought that he survived that battle.
Yeah.
So there was really no reason for them to believe that Yoda was still alive. And, of course, they knew that Obi-Wan was still alive because Obi-Wan came back and faced him.
Right.
And he knew that Obi-Wan had brought Luke with him, so the whole time they thought that Obi-Wan was the one. And in fact, in Empire Strikes Back, he was basically like, Obi-Wan can no longer help him or something. I think that was Empire, right? Because sometimes, that
was Empire when he went and kneeled before the Emperor.
Yeah.
His giant head, like the little.
Yeah, he was just basically like, well, Obi-Wan can no longer help him. not realizing that Obi-Wan was now a Force ghost.
Yep. Well, let's see.
What's our next one?
Our next question. How was Anakin able to kill so many Jedi Masters in the temple if some were more powerful than him? Well, I'll start this one off.
All right.
There weren't that many Jedi Masters in the temple who were more powerful than him at that time.
Absolutely correct.
Most of them were dispatched to go deal with Palpatine because they realized that, okay, if he's this powerful, one master just can't go in there and deal with this guy. I mean, so if you really look at that scene, you had a lot of people who sat on the Jedi Council who, and these are high level officials, if you will. They all got slaughtered by Palpatine like in a matter of moments. So they got wiped out. So Anakin really didn't have much to really contend with. And then on top of that, the sheer power of Anakin, because 1, he's the son of the Force. 2, he's now Darth Vader. So now he's got this huge burst of dark side flowing through him that's super powerful compared to considering where he's derived from.
Yeah, basically...
And then
the canon thing is like nobody at that point is more powerful than he was.
And then
on the Jedi side, except for maybe Yoda.
And then you also have to just think about he had a whole legion of stormtroopers with him that's going to overwhelm them, the Jedi anyway.
Yeah, and let's not forget the clone troopers are the ones that were wiping out the other Jedi.
Yeah, so they were just tearing everybody apart. So you had the masters who may have been left was probably like a custodian and Jocasta Nu, the librarian or something like that.
Which, of course, Darth Vader beat in the comic books. There was a fight between the two of them. It's actually, I think it's on the cover of the comic, because I remember looking at it going, oh, I have to read this.
She denied him his hall pass one day.
Yeah, it's like I didn't even know that she fought. It turns out that she's a super powerful Jedi Master, because I guess in order to be like a librarian there or something, you have to have all this knowledge. And it stands to reason, but
I mean, if you're the librarian,
you just kind of look at her
anyway. So
yeah, but I mean, it's just like you look at her and you don't think, oh, warrior that can go out and I mean, she held her own, man. She was like really
giving the business.
Yeah. But, ultimately she loses. But the thing is that, there were not a whole lot of people. And by the way, that comic does explain where she went during that whole, temple invasion and all that stuff. Actually, that whole comic series is really cool because it really goes into a lot of the Order 66 stuff and, how some of the Jedi escaped and just how a lot of that stuff went down. It's a good comic series to actually fill in gaps. So I would highly recommend that. But yeah, Anakin was almost, at least in power, nobody could really oppose him.
No, and especially, like I said, with all those legions of clone troopers behind him, I mean, whatever Jedi were there were definitely overwhelmed.
Yeah, and the only reason why Obi-Wan was able to do is, 1, because Obi-Wan trained him. He knew a lot of his moves. Obi-Wan was also well-versed in a lot of different styles as well. He was a good fighter. And plus, he was patient. And that's big when it comes to... And let's not forget, too, that Anakin, because he had a special bond with him, it wasn't like he was going to mow him down right away.
Right. So, yeah, that answers that one.
That does. Well, I think that's our show for today.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody, for joining us. Don't forget, submit your questions, because we would like to clear your mind, too.
Definitely check out the pictures that are still coming in from our trip to the Detroit Institute of Arts. Like it, share them.
Yeah, absolutely. Share that, go back, find that post, share it, and hit us up at Star Wars at headtoheadswpodcast.com. You can contact us that way. You can go to our Twitter, which is at headtoheadsw, Facebook.
Yeah, and if you all go to the DIA and see the exhibit, and you take pictures and you go with your family or just yourself, you got some cool selfies, post them on our site too. We'd love to see you guys. Yeah, absolutely. We'd like to get to know you guys, and that's a good point. Post them on there. Well, all right. I'm Eric Vancil. I'm Darryl Sanders. May the Force be with you. Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.